Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today. So for this video I wanted to do something just a little bit different. So a number of you guys over the last few weeks have asked me what I think about Brewdog selling their shares, or selling 22% of their shares to TSG Consumer Group over in America, who also own Pabst Blue Ribbon. So this was also kind of partly inspired by my friend Peter over at the Clueless Drinker, and I think he and I share kind of relatively similar views on this actually. And if you're not a returning subscriber to the channel, I've known Brewdog since about 2009 when I moved to Aberdeen to study chemistry, and probably as you can tell from the accent, I'm Scottish as well. And I think it's fair to say that after Schlenkerla, of course, which was what my German flatmate introduced me to and what got me into beer initially, Brewdog probably are the kind of gateway brewery for me when it came to American style craft beer and getting me into the whole thing. For me it was very cool that there was a local brewery brewing all these different styles of beers and bringing them over to Scotland and distributing them around the country and putting up the knowledge of beer. So I've got in a way Brewdog are a company that were very close to my heart. And I wanted to kind of give my personal evaluation of what I think's gone right for Brewdog, what they've done well, and what's gone wrong for them, and what they've done badly over the last couple of years, at least in my opinion. And that's what it's all about. It's my opinion, so just take it as you will. But as you know, I'm a scientist. My brain is kind of all over the place. You have to be a bit away with it to put the amount of time that I have into chemistry and physics, but I will attempt to make this as kind of concise as possible. So we'll go through the good things and the bad things I think about Brewdog. So the good things first then. So as a result of Brewdog and their growth, there's more people in Scotland that are aware of craft beer, there's more people that are drinking craft beer, and that's one of the things Brewdog always said they set out to do. They wanted to make people aware that there was more to beer than the likes of Tennant's, McEwen's, Belhaven Best and all of these sorts of things. So they've succeeded in that, and they've got people aware that beer is not just simply the kind of fizzy yellow stuff. So yeah, Brewdog did a good job there. The other thing that I mentioned a minute ago was that Brewdog were largely responsible for bringing styles like the IPA, the big hoppy, fruity IPAs over into Scotland and making them more in demand. I mean, there's breweries that have come after Brewdog like Tempest, Cromarty. There's a few other kind of smaller ones as well that are brewing all these styles of beer, and Brewdog really were the ones who paved the way for that. So yes, that's another positive about Brewdog coming into Scotland and doing what they did. The other thing that I would say is positive about them is that when you go across the world and you see all these different Brewdog bars, they do tend to have a local selection of beers in their bars. I mean, I've been to the one in Tokyo. The one in Tokyo, from what I remember, only had a few Japanese beers. It was mainly American things. And Brewdog beers, of course, that were available in there. There was some Mikkeller and all of this kind of stuff as well. There wasn't too big a selection in the one in Roppongi in Tokyo, but when you go to the one in Malmö, they've got a lot of Skåne beers. Where else have I been? I've been to the ones in the one in Bristol as well, and they have some of the local kind of Somerset beers and Cornwall beers and stuff like that as well. So I would say that about Brewdog. They do help to promote the other kind of local craft breweries as well. And probably the thing that links into that too is the collab fest that they do. They send people out, I think it's once a year, and they do the collab fest where the crews from each bar go out and brew with one of the local breweries, and then Brewdog help promote this, and they promote some of the other companies. So yeah, these are the kind of positive things that Brewdog do. And I have to praise them for that. I do think that what Brewdog have done for Scottish craft beer is good. They have got, the main thing is that they've got more people aware of the American styles of beer, and they have been kind of promoting that in Scotland, of course. One of the differences between the likes of Scotland and, say, Estonia, for example, and Finland and places like this, and Sweden to some degree as well. Scotland, of course, does have a kind of traditional beer scene, if you like. There's a lot of real ale, and in some ways that kind of spread from England, but there are traditionally the Scotch ales, and from what I understand, in a number of other countries, there isn't that same kind of beer heritage. So, and I find in Sweden, most of the breweries here do brew more in the American style, but in Scotland it's a little bit more of a split between the traditional American style, or sorry, the traditional Scottish style and English style in some ways, and the kind of new wave American style beers. I mean, my local breweries, the Harveston Brewery and Williams Brothers, they're more of a traditional traditional brewery, but I guess Williams Brothers brew the traditional beers with a little bit of an American edge on them in some ways. So there's a lot of interesting things in Scotland. Of course, we do have a huge heritage with whisky and things like that throughout history, but I guess Brewdog really were the ones who paved for these American IPAs and stuff to come into Scotland. Whether the other breweries eventually would have reached there, like Broughton and all of these guys, whether they would have eventually reached there, who knows, but Brewdog really were the first to produce these American beers, and that's the big kind of positive you can take away from them. So on to the things that I think are less positive from Brewdog. So over the years, I've noticed that a number of their beers have been getting watered down. I mean, Punk IPA is their flagship beer. From what I remember, Punk IPA was a 6% IPA, and it might have been 6.2% at one point if I remember correctly, but it had a nice caramelly malt base and it was really just a big hoppy beast of a beer, but they've watered it down and it's 5.6% now. There's no getting away from that. They changed the recipe, it's nowhere near as hoppy and it's kind of as much of a nerdy beer as it used to be. There was also the other things as well, like as I've gone through the lagers, there was 77 lager, there was fake lager, I forget the one that came after that. There was This Is Lager, and I think now it's Kingpin Lager as well. And one thing I've noticed going through the lagers, for example, when you have Kingpin now, it was distinctively more malty than This Is Lager was. This Is Lager was more of a nerdy kind of craft pills sort of thing, and it's obvious that as Brewdog have gone on, in a way they've watered their IPAs and their more hoppy beers down to try and appeal and get more people into drinking their beer rather than it being a sort of nerdy thing, if you like. So in some ways that plays into what they were saying, that they want to make more people aware of craft beer, but at the same time it is kind of abandoning what they started to do. They wanted to brew these big beasts, these kind of big beastly American beers and stick to that, but they are watering them down and trying to get bigger and get a bigger audience for their beers. And to me it's a little bit disappointing. One thing I would say is that the quality of their stouts, their darker beers to be fair, I don't think the quality of those has really suffered. And to be fair, when you think about it, most people that aren't really kind of into craft beer, that aren't kind of beer nerds, beer geeks if you like, they're not going to buy these big 8, 9, 10% imperial stouts. So I guess that's probably why that side of their brewing has been kind of relatively safe from it. But I would definitely say that a number of their beers have become watered down over the years, and there's no getting away from that. Regardless of what Brewdog will say, their beers have deteriorated in quality, particularly the things like IPAs and the lagers and stuff like this. And you know, to me it's just disappointing. The other thing you could probably say is that probably the majority of their core range they've had for a very long time. And I mean, if you go back, they just retired Hardcore IPA very recently, and I can understand why they did it. They said that this beer was more like a kind of mind bomb when it came to 2010 and things like that. So you can see what they say. Like in 2010, this was a really kind of big beer. It was really, really good at the time, but they wanted to retire it and do something that's a little bit more with the times. You can understand that because there's more hops, there's more malts, there's more of this kind of all the time. There's a lot more things kind of going on. So I can understand why they were saying this sort of thing. But at the same time, they do need to refresh their core range more than they do. They do these small batch beers every so often and all of this. So in some ways that's good, but they do need to refresh their core range a little bit more often than they do. And I think that's one of the negative things that they've done. The other thing I would pick Brewdog up on is their customer service. So back in the early days, and if you go to the flagship bar in Aberdeen, a number of the original guys are there. Originally Brewdog were hiring people that had a really, really good knowledge of beer and were hugely passionate about it. But when you go into the bars now, there's a lot of people who just, you could say to them a beer like Dogma or Riptide, and these were the core beers of Brewdog in years gone by. And a lot of these folk don't even know that these beers were originally core beers. So I would say that actually, that the knowledge of the staff that Brewdog had of beer has deteriorated over the last few years. That said, if you go into the original Brewdog bar in Aberdeen. There's a guy there who has a mohawk and he's got his arms tattooed and everything. He's been there for ages, and that guy, I forget his name, but he knows a ridiculous amount about beer. The other thing I would say about that is if you actually talk to them on social media and things, they're constantly using like marketing buzzwords and stuff like this. Social media is one of their biggest weapons, of course. As I've said many a time, their whole mantra, if you like, is about image. It's all about this kind of hipsterdom thing and beer geek, and I just cannot be bothered with that. I don't like beer snobbery, and I will get onto that a little bit more a bit later on. But if you talk to people from Brewdog, there's all these, we want to give kick-ass customers kick-ass customer service, and just say we want to be good at customer service. Just be humble about it. Don't try all this marketing shite. And it's the same thing on their bottles and stuff like this. One of the other things they did was they changed their labels. They had these very distinctive labels originally, and they changed them to be a bit more neutral, which you can see that's somebody telling them, oh, this is how you appeal to a wider audience. And it's all just about making money. Brewdog is getting on the money train these days. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So their marketing is very, very questionable. I do know that one of their their chief marketer, if you like, is Sarah Warman. She's titled as the Master Gunner, and she was a former blogger, of course, as well. And that's one of the other things I would criticise Brewdog for as well. As I say, their use of social media. I actually do know a fellow Beertuber who was offered a job at Brewdog of managing their social media. So what happened to him was that he was offered the job of reviewing Brewdog's beers and their partners' beers, but he was told specifically that he had to stop his own blog, which at the time he'd put about 2 years of work into, and he was told that you can review our beers and our partners' beers through our official channels, but you have to give them all rave reviews. And I know that he had the exact same reaction that I would have. He told them to shove it, basically, which is the right thing to do in my opinion. As a reviewer, you have to have a bit of integrity. As I said to you in the review you saw this morning, if Brewdog make a good beer, I'll tell you on here that it's a good beer. If I don't think it's up to the same quality, such as the Neon Overlord was, I'll tell you that I don't think it's good. It's a good quality beer. But I will compare it to other things and say, if you like this, if you like that, you'll like this particular beer. But Brewdog, as I say, they use their social media as their greatest weapon and things like that. And I do know that there's other bloggers they've employed, such as the guy from Beercast. I think his name was Chris, and I don't know him all that well actually. But I know he's worked for Brewdog, and his blog has stopped a number of years ago. There's Sarah Warman, of course, who has also stopped blogging. Then there was my friend, who I'm not going to mention his name just for because he isn't. But I'm not mentioning his name just for certain reasons. But I know that he was offered this job and told he had to stop his blog. So Brewdog do some very, very questionable things. They may deny that, but I know for a fact that this thing with bloggers does happen. And as I say, I go back, the other thing that I can link into there is customer service. Brewdog's co-owner in Sweden, a guy called Magnus, he used to have his own blog as well, and I think he does do a few other things as well. But he's a co-owner in Brewdog, and this goes back to their customer service element. I have seen him treat customers very questionably in the Malmo bar and in the Gothenburg bar events as well. And that's one thing I would say is, back in the early days of Brewdog, that just never would fly. It just would never fly. I think you've always got to treat customers with respect, and it's just stuff like that. I should probably tell you, when Brewdog opened up their bar in Malmo, I was encouraged by a couple of other beer bloggers in Sweden to apply for the job, because they were like, oh, you're Scottish, your Swedish is good enough to work in a bar, you've reviewed over 100 different Brewdog beers, you should go for it. And so I was like, oh well, okay, I'll go for it. And I didn't get it. I wasn't that bothered, and I'm still not bothered. I wouldn't want to work for Brewdog the way they're behaving these days, to be quite frank. There's a lot of other craft beer companies in Skåne that or even Copenhagen, that I would want to work for before Brewdog, but that's besides the point. But I was turned down for this thing, and I was just kind of like, I was just really questioning it, because I went into the bar on the night that they opened, and I asked if they had Dogma, and asked if they had Riptide and things like this, which you could actually get in Systembolaget at the time. And the folk that were behind the bar didn't even know that these were Brewdog beers. And this goes back to my point, is one of the big things, if you go into a craft beer bar, you've got to be passionate about beer. Maybe they were passionate about beer, but they just didn't know Brewdog's thing that well. But if you're going to work for a company, you need to know the products that your company puts out. You go out and you try a lot of their different beers, and you get a product knowledge. That's just basic for me, and that's what I say that Brewdog's marketing is becoming increasingly image-centric, and their customer service in some ways, while you can't fault them for their interpersonal skills and all this sort of thing, the customer service is kind of deteriorating and becoming a lot more buzzwordy and sort of image-centric, if you like. So that's another thing. I also have another kind of funny story that happened with this in regards to Brewdog generally. So one of the things that I would say, I had an incident where there's a page on Facebook called the UK Craft Beer Forum, and a lot of the other beer tubing guys and I have a bit of a laugh about this. There's one of the admins there by the name of Paul McDermott, and let's just say this. So there was a number of people, when Brewdog sold their shares to TSG Consumer Group, they were, you know, a lot of people were criticising Brewdog for watering down their beers constantly, and the admins on this group, one of whom was a guy called Gregor Johnston. To be fair to him, maybe I was a little bit harsh on him, but I kept asking him I asked him if he had some sort of vested interest in Brewdog, because a number of the admins on this group were jumping in and defending Brewdog at every turn for all of these things that they were doing, and I just thought that was very, very questionable. And I know, as I said, from the thing I know about the beer bloggers earlier, that made me wonder, you know, have Brewdog got some kind of vested interest? I mean, do they financially support this group or something like that? And you know, I'll be honest, if I met Gregor, I would buy him a beer and have a chat with him. But the main admin on this group is a guy called Paul McDermott, and the way that he behaves, I'm not convinced that he's all there. I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of NPD in there, narcissistic personality disorder, just because the guy just isn't right. He's just quite nasty. And I mean, there's people who join this group and they're just getting into craft beer. They're putting up photos like, oh, I tried Punk IPA for the first time. What does everyone else think about this? And he jumps straight down their throats and it's like, oh, this beer's been done a million times on here. And if someone posts a beer that's very, very rare, it's like, tasting notes, stop being a douche, and just all of this. He just acts like a dick. He acts like a 5-year-old kid. Just acts like an utter dick. And you know, it's that sort of beer snobbery. It's that kind of snobbery and just acting like an arsehole that puts people off craft beer drinkers. And you know, if people are getting into craft beer, you should be encouraging them rather than just acting like an idiot to them. You know, I would always say that. And it was quite funny. So I asked this guy Gregor about if he had any ties to Brewdog, and there are a number of Brewdog employees in that UK Craft Beer Forum group, and I said, is there some sort of vested interest in the group here about Brewdog not getting criticised here? And then this guy with the NPD flew off the handle and kicked me out of the group, which was quite funny. I just found it amusing. So there is a sort of fanboy culture about Brewdog in that way. And what do you know? 3 days later, they sold these shares to that consumer group over in America. So it was quite funny. And this again goes back to the marketing thing about Brewdog. In the past, you know, they have. In the past, they've done things like they've thrown Camden beer out the bars. They've thrown Ballast Point. They took Ballast Point's name off a collaboration beer that they did actually, which was quite funny. And then Brewdog go and sell a chunk of their shares to an equity group themselves. You know, you're not so punk anymore, Brewdog. Stop trying to pretend that you're the one fighting the corporations when really you're turning into them. There's a business structure going in there. I appreciate with a business you have to make money and support your employees and stuff like this, but don't try it. You know, you've built an empire. Don't try and pretend that you haven't. Don't try and pretend that you're trying to appeal to that you're not trying to appeal to more and more customers. It's pretty fucking obvious what you're trying to do. So you know, in that regard, that's one of the other problems I have with Brewdog a little bit. This constant drive for expansion is coming at the expense of them making good beer. They have had teething problems when they've moved into their new place in Aberdeen. They have had things like that, which yes, you can allow for, but you know, be a bit more humble. That's one of the things I love about the beer scene in Scandinavia. They just focus on making beer. They don't focus on, oh, we want to be the biggest craft brewery in the world, as we don't want to be the biggest craft beer company in the world. They just want, the folk in Scandinavia just want to make good beer. And why can't Brewdog just appreciate what they have and have the same? They're constantly looking for new bars, they're constantly looking for more money to expand, rather than just focusing on making beer as they did in the early days. And one of the main things that made me lose a lot of respect for Brewdog was the way they behaved recently with Aberdeenshire Council. So what happened was that Brewdog wanted to start up a hotel in Aberdeenshire next to the brewery, and there was a piece of land next to the brewery that they wanted to buy. This had been earmarked previously for a cemetery, And my dad and sister are both lawyers, so they explained the kind of legal ins and outs of this for me, so I do understand it to a fair degree. And this is the other thing. James Watt is a lawyer by trade, so he should know better. He studied law and economics at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, where, by the way, Martin Dickey studied brewing as well. And that's one of the other things I've found. Without going into personal attacks on this guy, James Watt is a very measured person. If you meet him, he likes to be in the limelight, he wants to make a name for himself in the industry, which in a way you can understand, but you can see, this is what I was getting into earlier about marketing buzzwords and things. He turns it on and tries to you know, sort of big himself up in a little bit. But if you meet Martin Dickey, I've met both of them, if you meet Martin Dickey, then he's a lot more humble, if you like. And Stuart Bowman was another one. He was a really nice guy, their first kind of head brewer when they got a little bit bigger. He was a lovely guy, a very talented brewer. They still have Franz, of course, as well, who's a really good brewer as well. I met him once, but just very, very briefly. And they still have him at the brewery from what I understand. But Stuart Bowman leaving might explain the quality of their beer in certain ways. But anyway, back onto this thing about the land next to the brewery. So Brewdog wanted to buy this piece of land to build a hotel, and this had been previously earmarked for a cemetery. And in Scotland, the law is such that when you buy a piece of land, you have to declare a purpose for it, and the purpose that is declared for the land affects the price of the land, or the price that you will pay for the land. So Brewdog offered the council a certain amount of money for this land, and that was for that was it just being, I think, a green space, if you like, or being earmarked for the cemetery. But if you intend this to be commercial land, then this puts the price of the land up significantly. So what Brewdog actually did was they put out a statement on their website and everything like this, and trying to undermine the position of the council, and basically saying, oh, the councillor, we've had independent audits on this thing. And it says the council are trying to overcharge us per acreage of the land, and it was nonsense, because the land, they hadn't actually assessed the land for a commercial purpose. They were assessing it for the purpose that it was already earmarked for, without applying for their new licence and stuff like this and changing the value of the land. So they were trying to bully the local council into basically giving way for them. They're like, we create jobs in the local economy and all this. You know, that is exactly the way big breweries behave. There's no getting around that. That's exactly the way big companies and corporate companies try to bully governments. And I mean, it is a very left political view, that. And one of the main reasons I've studied economics a little bit along with my astrophysics and my chemistry and stuff like this. One of the reasons the German economy was so successful is because a big portion of the companies there are small and medium sized, and it should be the same with any industry for an ideal situation. You will have some bigger companies, but you want it to be small and medium sized companies that own it. And in some ways I can understand this whole thing. The big people are reserved about the big companies buying smaller breweries and taking back the market share. It is, in a way, that is an attempt at monopolisation of the market. But Brewdog are behaving in the same way that these big companies that they say they were being the punks against, they're behaving in exactly the same way as the companies they're saying they were against in the first place. So it's utterly, utterly hypocritical. There was also this incident that they had with the bar in Birmingham as well, where either this was a very cleverly orchestrated marketing move from both of them, but James Watt was claiming that the lawyers of the company were sort of jumped on this thing and did it without his knowledge. But he is a lawyer, and he would know he's a lawyer by trade, and he would know the exact regulations and stuff like this. The bar in Birmingham, I believe, was called the Lone Wolf, if I'm remembering correctly, and of course their new distillery that they've started at Brewdog is called Lone Wolf Distillery as well. So the lawyers apparently jumped on this, and then James Watt swooped in and made a deal with them, oh, they'll sell the gins and all of this kind of thing. So there was a deal done, to be fair, they did get it sorted out, but I do wonder if perhaps that was a marketing ploy. That might be a conspiracy theory, who knows, and to be honest, this is beer, who really cares in the grand scheme of the world? But you know, there's all of these sort of things going on, and Brewdog's conduct has just, to me, as somebody who's known Brewdog since 2009 and watched them grow, it's just disappointing, this way that they're behaving. Many people consider them the face of Scottish craft beer, but the way they're behaving is very, very questionable, and for me it tarnishes the names of the people like Cromarty and Tempest Brew and all these other ones back in Scotland who are just focusing on making good beer. Brewdog are going out there and just trying to be like, we're the best, we want to make everyone aware of craft beer, rah, 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 rah. They're just doing all of this shit instead of focusing on making beer as they did in the early days. And I do wonder if that's part of the reason that Stuart Bowman left the company. I might be speculating here, but I think a lot of these things that are going on are from James Watt rather than from the likes of Martin Dickey and things like that. If you meet Martin Dickey, as I said, he's a very humble guy, but James Watt definitely has the ability to kind of turn a switch and turn on this kind of marketing buzzword sort of thing that he does. So it's just one of the things, to me, when Brewdog were one of the gateway breweries into craft beer for me, just the way they're kind of constantly focusing on expanding and their marketing and stuff, just honestly, if I could say one thing to Brewdog, just stop the marketing bullshit and get on with making beer. I've just reviewed this one, the Semi-Skimmed Occultist. You're capable of making good beer. Stop all the marketing shit and just focus on making things like this. Honestly, I mean, I've known your company since about a year and a half, 2 years after you were founded, and you're capable of making good beer. But seriously, just stop all this marketing shit and get on with the beer side of things. I think that's a good way to kind of sign off on this video and just say that to Brewdog. Stop with all the marketing bullshit and all of this image-centric thing that's going on just now, and just focus on making good beer. Stop trying to be the biggest in the world, and just stop the egotism, basically. Just make nice beer, make beer that people enjoy, and keep doing the things you do well. Support the local breweries in the areas of the bars, do this sort of thing. But I mean, if I started up my own brewery, as I say, I would want, I'd be happy with if I could go into a good beer shop around the world and my beer was available, which is what Brewdog have. I would be very happy with that. For me, that would be good. Maybe because my girlfriend is Japanese, I would want another brewery in Japan. Maybe I would put it under a different name, or I would have it under the same name, who knows, or if it was different names, brew the beers under license. But Brewdog have done outstandingly well from the balance sheet, but you can tell as they've gone on and gone on and gone on, they've kind of got greedy, and it's a shame, because the way they act, in my opinion at least, tarnishes the name of Scottish craft beer. And particularly the way that they've bullied the government. As I said, the way they tried to bully Aberdeenshire Council lost them a lot of respect in my eyes, and I just wish they would focus on making beer and supporting local craft beer industries as they used to do. So yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of sign off on this one. I've probably rambled for a good 25 minutes or so on this, but I hope you enjoyed my take on this one, on this kind of issue with Brewdog. Normally I can't be arsed with the beer politics, but since this was a Scottish company and one of the gateway breweries for me into craft beer, I just wanted to say my piece. So I hope you've enjoyed my sort of Brewdog rant, if you like, and I will see you soon with more reviews. As I said, if Brewdog make a good beer, I'm going to tell you on the channel that it's a good beer, but I do have my reservations about the way, as a company, they are behaving. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will catch you very soon, and hopefully I can review some of these collaboration beers that I've been mentioning from Brewdog too. So I will catch you very soon with more beer reviews, and yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Slàinte just now.